It is a story of wonder and tragedy, of an empire that once seemed invincible, yet fell with startling swiftness under the weight of foreign ambition and internal fracture. The Aztec Empire, a civilization celebrated for its architectural grandeur, complex societal structures, and spiritual devotion, thrived at the heart of Mesoamerica for over a century. Towering temples rose from the waters of Lake Texcoco, marketplaces buzzed with vibrant trade, and the pulsating rhythm of life intertwined with ritual and belief in ways both fascinating and profound. Yet, in the early 16th century, this mighty empire would face an encounter that would forever alter its destiny. Hello, and welcome to The Other Side Stories. Here, we travel beyond the usual headlines to explore the untold tales of world history, mysteries, turning points, and hidden connections that shaped our planet. If you love discovering how the past still echoes in our present, you're in the right place. Let's uncover the other side of history together. The Aztecs, also known as the Mexica, were not merely warriors and conquerors. They were architects of a sophisticated society, blending politics, religion, and economy into a tapestry that bound their vast empire. At the center of their world was Tenochtitlan, a city built on an island in Lake Texcoco, where canals and causeways connected floating gardens to towering pyramids and palaces. It was here that Montezuma II, the ninth emperor of the Aztec people, held dominion, embodying both the spiritual and political authority of his civilization. European eyes had only recently turned toward the lands of the New World, driven by dreams of gold, glory, and God. Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador whose ambition rivaled that of kings, set sail from Cuba in 1519 with a contingent of fewer than 600 men, carrying steel weapons, horses, and the unshakable belief that the lands they encountered were ripe for conquest. They arrived on the eastern shores of what is now Mexico, encountering the indigenous peoples who had, for generations, lived under the expansive reach of the Aztec Empire. The initial encounters were complex and fraught with tension. Cortés and his men were foreign in appearance and intent, their horses and firearms striking awe and terror into the hearts of those who had never seen such things. At the same time, discontent simmered within the empire. Many of the subject peoples who paid tribute to the Aztecs harbored resentment, feeling the burdens of subjugation and exploitation. Cortés, astutely perceptive, recognized an opportunity. By forging alliances with these resentful groups, he could exploit internal divisions to strengthen his position against the seemingly invincible Aztec power. As Cortés advanced toward Tenochtitlan, he encountered city-states like Tlaxcala, whose warriors had long been rivals to the Aztecs. Negotiations, often delicate and layered with deception, led to a military alliance that would prove instrumental. Thousands of indigenous warriors would join the Spanish, bringing their knowledge of terrain, siege tactics, and numbers to bear against the Aztec forces. This coalition of necessity, however, was precarious, built on a foundation of mutual suspicion and fragile trust. When Cortés and his forces finally reached the shores of Lake Texcoco, the spectacle of Tenochtitlan unfolded before them. Canals shimmered with reflected sunlight, temples soared toward the sky, and the central Great Temple, the Templo Mayor, stood as a testament to centuries of devotion and power. Montezuma II, wary yet curious, welcomed the foreigners, an act rooted in both tradition and uncertainty. Some chroniclers suggest that the Spaniards might fulfill ancient prophecies, interpreting their arrival as a supernatural sign. Others argue that diplomacy and prudence guided his actions, a desire to contain what could have otherwise been a violent confrontation. Within the walls of Tenochtitlan, initial interactions were marked with cautious hospitality. Cortés observed the city's grandeur, noting its cleanliness, organization, and the vibrant trade that animated its markets. The Spanish, dazzled, recorded meticulously the wealth and splendor they encountered, describing treasures of gold and silver, exquisite textiles, and an intricate understanding of agriculture that had sustained such a populous urban center. Yet, beneath this surface of cordiality, tension simmered. The Spaniards, never content with observation alone, sought leverage, hostages, and assurances, while Montezuma grappled with the unsettling presence of men whose customs, weapons, and intents were alien. Over the following months, the delicate equilibrium unraveled. Cortés, increasingly emboldened, took Montezuma prisoner, effectively assuming control of the empire through coercion and psychological pressure. This bold move destabilized the socio-political fabric of Tenochtitlan. The emperor, once a symbol of divine authority, was now a pawn under foreign command. The Aztec nobility and populace, struggling to reconcile loyalty, fear, and outrage, faced an unprecedented crisis of leadership and legitimacy. Simultaneously, the Spaniards' presence introduced elements that the Aztec society had never confronted. Diseases such as smallpox, carried unintentionally by the Europeans, swept through the population with devastating consequences. Mortality rates soared, striking down both commoners and nobles, leaving families shattered and communities weakened. The invisible scourge amplified the sense of chaos, undermining morale and the ability to organize effective resistance. The outbreak of violence became inevitable. In June 1520, tensions exploded into open conflict, leading to a brutal confrontation known as La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows. Cortés and his forces attempted a nighttime retreat from the city, only to be met with fierce resistance. Many Spaniards and their indigenous allies perished, and the city seemed poised to expel the invaders. Yet, the episode was not the end of the conquest, but rather a prelude to a campaign of return, consolidation, and siege that would ultimately seal the fate of the Aztec Empire. Cortés regrouped, reinforcing his troops and capitalizing on alliances with subject peoples who sought vengeance against Aztec overlords. Over the next several months, a systematic campaign unfolded. The Spanish and their allies constructed brigantines to navigate the lake, cutting off supplies and isolating Tenochtitlan from surrounding territories. The siege was relentless, combining starvation, psychological warfare, and repeated assaults. The Aztecs, resolute yet increasingly weakened, fought fiercely to defend their homes, their temples, and the cultural heart of their civilization. As the siege dragged on, the social and spiritual cohesion of the Aztec people was strained. The death toll, compounded by famine and disease, created a situation of unparalleled hardship. Reports describe acts of bravery, desperation, and profound grief as the people faced the collapse of the structures that had defined their world for generations. Finally, on August 13, 1521, after months of siege, negotiation, and unrelenting pressure, Tenochtitlan fell. The city, once radiant with life, was reduced to ruin. Its temples were desecrated or dismantled, the palaces pillaged, and the survivors subjected to the authority of the Spanish conquerors. The Aztec political structure disintegrated, and with the death of Montezuma II and his successors, the empire ceased to exist as an independent entity. In its place, a new colonial regime emerged, forever altering the trajectory of Mesoamerican history. Yet, the fall of the Aztec Empire was not merely a story of conquest. It was a complex intersection of cultural encounter, strategic calculation, and unintended consequence. The Spaniards brought with them new technologies, religions, and governance systems, while the indigenous peoples contributed their knowledge, manpower, and resilience. The collision of worlds created a hybrid reality, the effects of which would reverberate for centuries, shaping identity, politics, and society in ways that continue to influence the region today. The aftermath of Tenochtitlan's fall marked not just the end of an empire, but the beginning of profound transformation across Mesoamerica. With the power vacuum left by the Aztec collapse, Spanish authorities sought to consolidate control over newly acquired territories. Cities were reorganized, land was redistributed, and the intricate web of tributary obligations that had bound the region under Aztec rule was replaced by European-style administration. Indigenous elites, previously embedded within Aztec hierarchies, were sometimes co-opted to serve as intermediaries, navigating the delicate balance between survival and cultural preservation. Amid this political restructuring, religion became a powerful instrument of control and assimilation. Missionaries arrived in force, introducing Catholicism with a mix of persuasion and coercion. Churches were erected atop destroyed temples, while Christian festivals were scheduled to coincide with traditional Aztec ceremonies, blending familiar customs with new doctrines. Despite these pressures, indigenous spirituality endured in syncretic forms, allowing people to retain a connection to ancestral practices while outwardly adhering to colonial mandates. This cultural resilience speaks to the enduring strength of identity even under circumstances of conquest and oppression. The Spanish conquest also reshaped the demographic landscape. Epidemics of smallpox, measles, and other European diseases continued to decimate populations, striking entire villages and urban centers alike. The collapse of Aztec political structures intensified the vulnerability of communities, leaving them without the organizational capacity to respond effectively. Mortality rates soared, reshaping labor systems and settlement patterns. Survivors faced both grief and dislocation, navigating a world fundamentally altered by foreign incursion and biological catastrophe. Economically, the introduction of European crops, livestock, and technologies transformed local subsistence practices. Maize, beans, and squash, staples of pre-conquest agriculture, remained central, yet were now complemented by wheat, sugar, and domesticated animals such as cattle, pigs, and sheep. Land use patterns shifted, integrating European-style estates with indigenous cultivation methods. Markets, once dominated by local trade networks, now also exchanged goods bound for transatlantic shipment, tying Mesoamerica into the global economy of the early modern period. The Aztec vision of economic order, centered on tribute and internal trade, gave way to an externally oriented, extractive system dictated by colonial priorities. Cultural and artistic life also adapted under these new conditions. Indigenous artisans continued to produce ceramics, textiles, and metalwork, often blending traditional motifs with European forms and religious iconography. The creation of codices, maps, and illustrated chronicles documented both the pre-conquest world and the ongoing transformations under Spanish rule. These works served multiple purposes, as tools for governance, as records of history, and as expressions of identity and memory. Through such cultural production, the legacy of the Aztecs persisted, informing the hybridized cultural landscape of colonial Mexico. The fall of the Aztec Empire also had profound psychological impacts. Survivors grappled with the trauma of conquest, loss of sovereignty, and the deaths of family, leaders, and community. The abrupt disruption of social norms, religious rituals, and governance structures created a sense of instability and uncertainty. Yet, in response, communities developed strategies of resilience, such as clandestine continuation of rituals, adaptation of European symbols into local practices, and negotiation of colonial hierarchies to secure survival and influence. These adaptive measures illustrate the interplay of continuity and change in the wake of empire's collapse. Historical interpretation of the conquest has evolved over centuries. Early European accounts often emphasized divine favor and the heroism of conquistadors, portraying the fall as an inevitable triumph of European superiority. Later scholarship, informed by indigenous narratives, archaeology, and critical historiography, highlights the contingency, complexity, and human cost of the events. Modern historians examine the conquest as a multifaceted encounter, shaped by strategic alliances, miscommunication, environmental factors, and the unintended consequences of disease. This nuanced understanding challenges simplistic narratives and underscores the importance of multiple perspectives in reconstructing the past. The role of indigenous alliances in the conquest is particularly noteworthy. Without the support of groups such as the Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, and others, the Spanish effort might have faltered. These allies provided crucial manpower, knowledge of terrain, and intelligence on Aztec defenses. The alliance system, however, was fraught with tension as motivations varied from revenge to political calculation. Understanding the conquest requires recognition of the agency of these indigenous actors, whose choices and actions significantly shaped the outcome, demonstrating that history is rarely a story of unilateral domination. Military technology also played a critical role in the Spanish success. Steel swords, crossbows, firearms, and mounted cavalry provided advantages unfamiliar to the Aztecs. Yet technology alone was insufficient. Tactical innovation, psychological warfare, and exploitation of social divisions proved equally decisive. Cortés's use of brigantines to control Lake Texcoco, combined with sustained siege and attrition tactics, illustrates the strategic sophistication underlying the conquest. The fall of Tenochtitlan thus represents not merely a technological mismatch, but a convergence of leadership, alliance building, and opportunistic strategy. Disease remains one of the most significant factors in the empire's downfall. Smallpox, introduced inadvertently by Europeans, spread rapidly through populations lacking immunity. Epidemics weakened resistance, decimated leadership, and sowed fear and disarray. The demographic collapse fundamentally altered social structures, undermining the ability of communities to maintain cohesion, resist militarily, or preserve governance systems. In this sense, the Aztec Empire's fall was not only the product of human conflict, but also the consequence of biological forces beyond the control of either conquerors or the conquered. The spiritual dimensions of the conquest cannot be overlooked. For the Aztecs, the arrival of the Spaniards challenged long-standing cosmologies. The convergence of unfamiliar beings, strange animals, and devastating disease prompted reflection and anxiety about divine favor and cosmic order. Montezuma II's decisions, often interpreted as indecisive or passive, can be understood in this context. A ruler navigating unprecedented spiritual and existential uncertainty. The eventual collapse of the empire represents a profound dislocation of worldview, where material, political, and spiritual forces intertwined in catastrophic ways. Cultural memory of the Aztec Empire persisted long after conquest. Oral histories, codices, and early chronicles preserved narratives of heroism, betrayal, and resilience. These records illuminate not only the events themselves, but also how they were interpreted and remembered by subsequent generations. They reveal a society grappling with trauma, identity, and continuity, providing invaluable insight into the human dimensions of conquest. The preservation of this memory ensured that the Aztec experience remained a living part of Mesoamerican cultural heritage. In addition to memory, the fall of the Aztec Empire reshaped the landscape itself. Tenochtitlan was physically transformed. Canals filled or were redirected, temples were demolished, and the urban grid was modified to accommodate Spanish administrative and religious needs. Environmental modifications, from the introduction of European agriculture to the construction of colonial infrastructure, reshaped human-environment interaction. These changes, both practical and symbolic, reflected the broader process of imposition and adaptation that characterized the colonial period. The consequence of conquest extended beyond Mexico, influencing transatlantic networks of trade, migration, and cultural exchange. Wealth extracted from the Americas fueled European economies, facilitated further exploration, and intensified competition among colonial powers. Knowledge of the New World, including its peoples, resources, and social structures, circulated widely, shaping perceptions, policies, and ambitions. The fall of the Aztec Empire thus became a pivotal node in a global narrative linking local events to larger historical transformations. Yet, the human story at the heart of this history remains paramount. The courage, suffering, and resilience of individuals, warriors defending their city, families enduring famine and disease, leaders navigating impossible choices, illustrate the lived experience of conquest. These stories remind us that history is not merely the movement of armies or the enactment of policy, but the sum of countless personal experiences, each shaping and shaped by the broader currents of change. In understanding the fall of the Aztec Empire, we confront both the magnitude of historical forces and the profound humanity of those who lived through them. The resilience of Aztec culture was most evident in the ways communities adapted to survive under colonial rule. Even as Spanish authorities imposed new laws, religion, and economic systems, indigenous people preserved essential elements of their heritage. Agricultural practices, ritual ceremonies, and language persisted in both overt and subtle ways. For example, traditional maize cultivation continued alongside introduced European crops, while festivals and religious observances were often reframed to align with Christian calendars, ensuring continuity of cultural identity. This adaptability underscores the enduring human capacity to maintain a sense of self and community amidst disruption. Social structures, too, were transformed but not entirely erased. Indigenous elites were often co-opted as intermediaries between colonial administrators and local populations, retaining influence while navigating a new political reality. This created a layered society in which old hierarchies intersected with imposed colonial structures. Commoners, meanwhile, faced labor demands, tribute obligations, and new social norms, yet retained agency in the negotiation of daily life. These dynamics illustrate that conquest, while dramatic, was not absolute. Human societies are complex and capable of adaptation even under extreme pressure. Education and the transmission of knowledge also shifted significantly. Missionaries established schools intended to teach European languages, religion, and customs, often at the expense of traditional knowledge systems. Nevertheless, indigenous scholarship persisted, whether through the continued creation of codices, the oral transmission of history, or the maintenance of artisanal skills. This duality, formal suppression paired with grassroots preservation, highlights the ways in which knowledge can endure even under systemic pressure. Economically, the integration of the former Aztec territories into the colonial economy had profound implications. Trade networks that had once centered on local markets and tribute were redirected to serve European interests. Valuable resources, particularly silver, became a cornerstone of imperial extraction, while local labor was redirected to meet the demands of mines, haciendas, and public works. Indigenous peoples often participated in these systems under coercion, yet they also found opportunities to adapt and engage with new markets. Over time, this created a complex economic landscape in which traditional practices and colonial imperatives coexisted and intertwined. The environmental impact of conquest was equally significant. The introduction of European plants and animals altered ecosystems, while urban restructuring changed patterns of water management and land use. Tenochtitlan's intricate canal system, once central to transportation and agriculture, was partially dismantled, reshaping the city's geography. European construction techniques, combined with new agricultural practices, imposed both practical and symbolic changes on the landscape, signaling the transition from Aztec sovereignty to colonial dominance. These environmental transformations serve as enduring markers of the empire's fall. Religion played a central role in the colonial experience, both as a tool of control and as a medium of cultural continuity. Catholicism was aggressively promoted, yet indigenous communities often adapted these teachings to align with pre-existing spiritual frameworks. Saints, rituals, and symbols were sometimes interpreted through an indigenous lens, creating syncretic forms of worship that blended European and Mesoamerican traditions. In this way, spiritual life persisted even as political and military structures were dismantled, reflecting the adaptability and resilience of human belief systems. The conquest also left a profound psychological legacy. Survivors and subsequent generations grappled with trauma, loss, and identity formation. The collapse of a once mighty empire produced a sense of dislocation, as familiar political, social, and spiritual structures vanished almost overnight. Yet communities found ways to maintain cohesion, transmit cultural memory, and adapt to the new colonial reality. Oral history, ritual, and the preservation of language functioned as mechanisms of resilience, allowing the past to inform the present, even in altered circumstances. Art and material culture became critical sites of adaptation and continuity. Indigenous artisans continued to create ceramics, textiles, and metalwork, often incorporating European motifs alongside traditional designs. Codices and illustrated manuscripts documented both the pre-conquest world and the ongoing transformations under colonial rule, providing a tangible record of cultural survival. These works illustrate the enduring creativity of Aztec society and its ability to navigate a rapidly changing world, preserving identity and knowledge for future generations. Historiographically, the fall of the Aztec Empire has inspired diverse interpretations. Early European narratives emphasized divine providence and military superiority, portraying the conquest as inevitable. Later analyses, informed by indigenous sources, archaeology, and critical historiography, highlight contingency, human agency, and the interplay of multiple factors. Modern scholarship examines the conquest as a complex encounter involving diplomacy, strategy, disease, and cultural negotiation, emphasizing that history is rarely linear or simplistic. This perspective encourages a more nuanced understanding of both conquest and resilience. The role of alliances remains a crucial dimension in understanding the empire's fall. Cortés's success depended not solely on European weaponry, but on his ability to mobilize indigenous forces dissatisfied with Aztec domination. These alliances were fluid, influenced by local politics, revenge motives, and strategic calculations. By leveraging these divisions, the Spanish amplified their effectiveness while exposing vulnerabilities within the Aztec imperial structure. The fall of the empire, therefore, was not a unilateral victory, but a multifaceted process shaped by interdependent human choices. Disease, as previously noted, was a transformative factor in the conquest. Smallpox, measles, and other pathogens introduced by Europeans decimated populations unprepared for such epidemics. The rapid spread of disease disrupted social, political, and military systems, contributing significantly to the empire's collapse. This intersection of biological and human factors underscores the unpredictability and contingency of history, illustrating that conquest was not solely determined by martial skill or leadership, but by a complex interplay of environmental, social, and epidemiological forces. Cultural memory played a crucial role in shaping post-conquest identity. Indigenous communities maintained narratives of heroism, resistance, and survival, preserving a sense of history even under colonial domination. These narratives, transmitted through oral tradition, codices, and early chronicles, documented both the events of conquest and their moral and spiritual implications. By preserving memory, communities ensured continuity of identity, allowing cultural values, social norms, and historical understanding to endure despite external pressure. Archaeology provides additional insights into the empire's collapse and its aftermath. Excavations of Tenochtitlan and surrounding sites reveal the urban planning, engineering, and material culture of the Aztecs. Artifacts such as ceremonial objects, pottery, and tools provide tangible connections to daily life, belief systems, and social organization. These findings, combined with documentary sources, allow historians to reconstruct the lived experience of conquest, offering a richer understanding of both the magnitude of the transformation and the resilience of the people who endured it. The fall of the Aztec Empire also offers broader lessons about human societies and the nature of historical change. It illustrates the consequences of technological disparity, the importance of alliances, and the unpredictability of complex systems. It highlights the role of disease, environmental factors, and individual agency in shaping outcomes. Moreover, it emphasizes the interplay of culture, politics, and psychology, demonstrating that history is not merely the product of material forces, but also of human perception, belief, and decision-making. Despite the catastrophic consequences of conquest, Aztec culture persisted in new forms. Language, art, cuisine, and ritual continued to evolve, blending pre-colonial traditions with European influences. Communities adapted to colonial systems while preserving elements of their heritage, ensuring that the essence of Aztec civilization endured. In this way, the fall of the empire was not an absolute erasure, but a transformation, a reconfiguration of identity, culture, and society in response to extraordinary circumstances. The story of the Aztec Empire's collapse also informs contemporary understanding of resilience and cultural survival. It demonstrates that even in the face of overwhelming external pressure, societies can maintain continuity, adapt, and find ways to preserve memory and identity. The legacy of the Aztecs is evident in modern Mexico, where language, ritual, and art continue to reflect the enduring influence of pre-conquest civilization. Through this lens, history is not only a record of defeat, but also a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. The interplay of conquest and adaptation further underscores the complexity of cultural exchange. While the Spanish imposed new systems of governance, religion, and economy, indigenous peoples selectively adopted, resisted, and transformed these influences. This dynamic process produced a hybridized cultural landscape, where old and new coexisted, interacted, and shaped one another. The Aztec experience thus offers valuable insights into the ways in which societies negotiate change, preserve identity, and navigate external pressure. As centuries passed, the memory of the Aztec Empire continued to resonate within the collective consciousness of Mesoamerican peoples. Stories of Tenochtitlan's towering temples, bustling marketplaces, and disciplined warriors were passed down through generations, forming the foundation of cultural identity. These narratives did more than preserve history. They served as moral and spiritual lessons, illustrating the consequences of ambition, the fragility of power, and the enduring importance of community, resilience, and faith. In this way, the Aztec legacy transcended the immediate tragedy of conquest, offering a source of pride and continuity amid profound transformation. Education and storytelling became central mechanisms for maintaining cultural cohesion. Indigenous elders taught children not only practical skills, but also the values and traditions that had guided their ancestors. Rituals were carefully preserved, often adapted to fit within the new religious framework imposed by the Spanish. The blending of Catholic and Aztec symbolism produced a unique syncretism, visible in festivals, visual arts, and religious practices. This hybrid cultural identity was a testament to human adaptability and the capacity to retain meaning in the face of radical change. The resilience of memory extended to political and social organization. While formal Aztec governance was dismantled, indigenous communities developed mechanisms to navigate colonial structures, often negotiating with Spanish authorities to maintain autonomy over local matters. Leaders emerged who understood both the imposed colonial frameworks and the needs of their communities, ensuring that indigenous voices and practices continued to influence everyday life. In this sense, the Aztec collapse was not a total erasure, but a transformation, enabling the continuation of identity under new circumstances. Art and architecture served as vital tools for cultural preservation. Though many temples were destroyed, artisans continued to produce objects imbued with traditional motifs, stories, and symbolism. Codices, often clandestinely created, documented historical events, genealogies, and religious knowledge, providing a tangible record of the pre-conquest world. These works, whether in stone, pigment, or textile, acted as repositories of memory, bridging past and present and asserting the persistence of Aztec cultural identity despite colonial domination. Language played a particularly critical role. Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, remained a medium of daily communication, ritual, and record-keeping, while Spanish gradually became dominant in administration, education, and commerce. Indigenous languages persisted, transmitting knowledge, tradition, and identity across generations. The survival of Nahuatl illustrates the profound resilience of culture, even when political and military structures are dismantled. It is a reminder that conquest may suppress, but rarely fully eradicates human expression. The spiritual dimension of survival is equally compelling. Despite efforts to replace Aztec religion with Catholicism, indigenous belief systems endured in various forms. Rituals, cosmologies, and concepts of the sacred were preserved, often syncretized with European practices. Sacred spaces, previously the site of temples and ceremonial centers, were repurposed or integrated into colonial architecture. Through these adaptations, spiritual life continued to sustain communities, providing meaning, continuity, and resilience in the face of upheaval. The Aztec legacy also had a lasting impact on economic and social structures. While tribute systems were replaced with colonial taxation and labor requirements, indigenous knowledge of agriculture, irrigation, and urban planning remained invaluable. Communities drew upon these skills to adapt to new economic realities, cultivating land, managing resources, and participating in trade networks shaped by both European and indigenous influences. This blending of expertise ensured the survival of critical knowledge even under drastically altered conditions. In examining the fall of the Aztec Empire, it becomes clear that history is rarely a story of absolute triumph or defeat. Rather, it is a complex interplay of agency, circumstance, and adaptation. The conquest was enabled by strategic alliances, technological advantages, and the devastating effects of disease. Yet indigenous peoples exercised agency in shaping their responses, preserving culture, and negotiating survival. The collapse of political power was not the end of civilization, but a pivot, a moment in which resilience and creativity defined the path forward. Modern scholarship continues to explore these dimensions, integrating archaeology, ethnohistory, and critical analysis to understand the full scope of the conquest's impact. Researchers examine the interplay of environment, society, and disease, the role of gender, class, and alliance networks, and the ways in which memory and narrative shaped both contemporary and subsequent perceptions of the events. This holistic approach underscores the importance of multiple perspectives in reconstructing the past and honors the complexity of human experience during a period of unprecedented upheaval. The conquest also offers profound lessons for contemporary societies. It reminds us of the consequences of cultural collision, the fragility of political structures, and the unpredictable impact of biological and environmental factors. It emphasizes the importance of diplomacy, adaptation, and alliance building, and the ways in which communities respond to disruption with resilience, creativity, and innovation. By studying the fall of the Aztec Empire, we gain insight not only into the past, but into enduring human capacities for survival, memory, and cultural continuity. Even today, the shadow of Tenochtitlan's grandeur can be glimpsed in the streets of modern Mexico City, a metropolis built upon the ruins of the once mighty island capital. Archaeological excavations reveal the foundations of temples, palaces, and causeways, connecting contemporary life to the layered history of conquest, adaptation, and resilience. Museums, historical sites, and cultural institutions preserve artifacts and narratives, ensuring that the story of the Aztecs informs identity, scholarship, and collective memory in the present day. Furthermore, the story of the Aztec Empire's fall resonates globally as a paradigmatic example of cross-cultural encounter and the consequences of imperial ambition. It illuminates broader patterns in human history, how societies interact, collide, and transform, how technology, disease, and diplomacy shape outcomes, and how memory and culture endure even when political structures collapse. The Aztec experience serves as a touchstone for understanding the complexity of historical change, reminding us that human history is a tapestry woven from both triumph and tragedy, conquest and resilience. In reflecting on this narrative, one is struck by the depth of human experience, the courage of warriors, the strategic vision of leaders, the suffering of civilians, and the enduring creativity of artisans and scholars. The fall of the Aztec Empire is not merely a story of military defeat, but a profound illustration of the ways in which culture, identity, and memory persist beyond the collapse of political power. It highlights the intricate interdependence of social, spiritual, and material life, and the enduring capacity of human societies to navigate transformation. Today, the legacy of the Aztecs lives on in language, art, ritual, and collective memory. It is present in festivals, cuisine, and cultural expressions that continue to draw from pre-conquest traditions. It is encoded in the architecture, urban planning, and place names that link modern life to the layered history of Mesoamerica. The Aztec Empire may have fallen, but its spirit endures, a testament to human creativity, resilience, and the power of memory. As we look back across the centuries, the fall of the Aztec Empire reminds us that history is never simply a record of events, but a living dialogue between past and present. It invites us to consider the consequences of encounter, the forces of resilience, and the ways in which human communities navigate the challenges of survival, adaptation, and memory. The conquest of Tenochtitlan and the fall of the Aztec Empire remain emblematic of the transformative power of history. They illustrate the convergence of military strategy, diplomacy, disease, and cultural negotiation, producing outcomes of immense human consequence. Yet amid destruction, adaptation flourished, preserving language, ritual, art, and social cohesion. The Aztec story reminds us that even in the face of catastrophic disruption, cultural memory, resilience, and identity endure, shaping the world for generations to come. And so, the tale of the Aztec Empire, with all its grandeur, tragedy, and resilience, continues to inform our understanding of history. It challenges us to recognize the complexity of human societies, the interplay of forces that shape outcomes, and the enduring significance of memory and culture. The fall of an empire is never merely a story of loss. It is also a story of adaptation, continuity, and the remarkable capacity of people to navigate profound change.